join us this morning. I happen to know a gentleman that just came in Juneau, and he's here to give you a report. Representative Kevin McCase.
Thanks, everybody. So I have some stuff from Senator Wilson on the budget. He put together a nice sort of summary for the Matsu budget, and I should probably stand back where everybody can see me. So if anybody has any questions on the budget, I'm happy to, or Senator Wilson or Senator Jower also happy to talk about that. I have some different data. The last few days of the budget talks are kind of interesting for those of you who have not ever seen it or watched it or anything like that. So typically what happens is the House puts together the budget. The House Finance Department or the Finance Committee puts together the budget. Then it goes to the House floor. We debate it. We put in amendments. It's a couple of 2 or 3 days worth of debate. And then it goes to the Senate. And the Senate Finance Committee does their thing, and Senator Wilson is on the Senate Finance Committee, and they debate and they put in their amendments and that sort of stuff, and then it comes back to the House for concurrence. And the House looks at it, the full House looks at the budget, and we decide as a body, all 40 of us, if we're going to concur with the Senate changes or not. So that's where the contention came in that you have probably heard about, is we as a House pretty much had the votes when it first came over to concur with the Senate. One of the things that happened on the floor of the Senate, not in the Finance Committee, but on the floor of the Senate, is a full PFD passed the floor of the Senate by one vote, I believe. We decided, most of us in the minority decided that we were going to concur with it, and we had the votes from the majority as well to concur with the budget. It would have been the first time since 1982 that concurrence had happened, that the House had concurred with the Senate's changes. We felt it was time to shift the paradigm. We felt, the House minority did, that we didn't want to put the budget back in the hands of those 6 people. That happens every year. It goes, if we did not concur, it would go back to the Senate Finance Committee co-chairs and the who were no doubt going to be selected by the Senate President and one other, and the 2 finance people from the House. So there's a group of 6 people that then determine via what's called a conference committee how the budget is going to come out. As a House, we thought, minority, we thought it was time to shift the paradigm. We thought it was time to change things up because this conference committee in the last 10 years or 15 years seems to have been the genesis of all the spending. 6 people are now determining the budget instead of 60. So we decided that A, it had a full PFD, B, and this is especially for me, I did not want to put the budget back into the hands of the very people that stripped out the anti-abortion amendment. And C, we thought it would do the most good for the most number of people with a full PFD with the looming inflation and high oil costs and everything else. So we wanted to concur. The Speaker of the House got wind of that she didn't have the votes, and she held it up for 3 days until all of the alphabet soup organizations, such as the Alaska Chamber and the various other industry organizations, had a chance to put pressure on the legislators and find a way to get us to vote that we didn't concur, and that's exactly what happened. So that's where you see all the contention comes in. After it went back to the Senate, or after we voted not to concur, then the conference committees are established, and because of the time compression, they only have like 2 days to put together this $15 billion budget and put it back to us all to vote on. When it came back, I voted against it because it didn't have a full PFD. It didn't have any of the anti-abortion language in it that was any kind of effective, not even the Hyde Amendment. And I felt it was too bloated. For instance, there's $15 million for the Long Trail. Alaska Long Trail, to me, sounds like a really great project when we have the money to do it. Right now, we have such an infrastructure deficit, we have to focus on those things that give us a return on investment. So That long trail managed to make it in there, and now I see there's a bill in the U.S. Congress by Lisa Murkowski to turn the long trail, after we spent $15 billion on it, over to the Department of Interior, I believe.
15 million.
Yeah. Yeah, million, sorry. It's a billion, yeah, sorry. Numbers kind of. So anyways, so there's a number of reasons I voted no on the budget, and most conservatives voted no on the budget. I will tell you, it became very contentious, as you have seen probably. And there were some real hard discussions and hard issues there. Most of us conservatives, most of us Republicans have the same goals. Every one of us has the same goals. What we're arguing about is process. And if you really, really look at it, my goals, Kirka's goals, Eastman's goals, Carpenter's goals, we're all the same. We're pro-life, we're anti-big budget, but there is a process, and we argue about the process, and unfortunately that's what causes the division in the Republican Party. So some of the budget things that the Mat-Su got, and thanks to Senator Wilson, the snow track development program, we got 200 and these are millions, 250 million? No, 250,000, I'm sorry, yeah. Vine Road improvements, KGB to Hollywood, 7.7 million, hello boss. Mat-Su Trails and Parks Foundation, Susitna Valley winter only motorized multi-use trail, that's part of the long trail, got 100,000. The City of Palmer wastewater treatment plant improvement. Now remember, I mentioned infrastructure deficit. This is one of them, $6.9 million. It's one of those that it's you pay me now or you pay me later. Nobody wants to put $6.9 million into a wastewater treatment plant improvement, but it had to be done. That's part of what government does, and we have to, as conservatives, we have to weigh the return on investment versus the money we spent, and that's what we do. Mat-Su Burrow Palmer Hay Flats Trail, part of the long trail again. Mat-Su First Responder Training Facility. So if those of you that don't know, the fire departments in the Mat-Su are a little bit different. They are all kind of separated into fire service areas. Lynn and I are not even part of a fire service area because we're too far out. They need to start coming together and having common training and common, so that when they support each other, and they're mostly volunteers, their training is all the same, their radios are all the same, they know each other, they know who's talking on the radio, so this was an important one. Fairview Loop reappropriation to Tokchat Road. That money was already in the budget, had already been appropriated, it was just reappropriated. Mat-Su Arctic Winter Games, another one of those return on investments. We're hearing that the Arctic Winter Games actually bring a pile of money into the community that supports them. So for us, this was a no-brainer. We have a return on investment. We support our small businesses that are going to benefit. Then there was $30 million for the Mat-Su transportation infrastructure project, and that is matched and contingent on the Mat-Su contributing as well. So, and then there was another reappropriation for the South Big Lake Road construction. So those are some of the things that the Mat-Su got out of this budget. And I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions, and I know that Senator Wilson has plenty of answers because of his seat on the Finance Committee. One of the other things I wanted to talk about that a couple of us are working on is the cost of putting in legislation. So our legal department is involved in the design and publishing of bills, but they don't work for free. And as of the end of the March of this year, the most prolific member of the 32nd legislature had 119 bill requests. And this is just the bill request. Those requests had an additional 381 revision requests associated with them for a total of 500 work orders with legal. The total cost of this for the busiest legislator, remember this doesn't include amendments or legal opinions that he may have requested, is $93,423.07. Of all of these bills, that legislator got 0 passed. In fact, the top 21 bill writers, the top users of our legal department, have cost the state $641,000 for their bills and revisions, and most of these have well north of 100 work orders with ledge legal. If you put it another way, 35% of the membership of the legislature have put in 61% of all the bills. The total cost to the state of all bills written, and this isn't the cost that the bills may generate to the budget. This is the cost of actually writing the bills. The total cost is, of all the bills written by the end of the March of the second year of the 32nd legislature, is $1,049,460.38. That's 5,042 work orders by the legal department by 60 legislatures, and we passed less than 100 bills. And many of those were written by the governor. None of what I just said includes my time, my staffers' time. And keep in mind, the biggest problem with this is all 60 legislators are using the same legal department. So if there is one person that's putting in an inordinate number of bills, it means that bills that I put in take longer to get out. There are bills that have been in ledge legal for 6 months. So if you have a bill that you want me to write, you have some specific thing that needs to be done and we want to write a bill and we discuss it, the chances of me getting it in, unless I get it in ahead of some of the more prolific legislators, are pretty slim. So what we're talking about here is FACL. This is clogging up the pipeline, clogging up the works, keeping others from putting bills in. And specifically, it was designed by the Democrats. This is a Saul Alinsky tactic to clog up the pipeline and prevent Republicans from getting their bills passed. It was never designed to be used by, this comes from a book called Confrontational Politics by H.L. Richardson, Senator. It was never designed to be used against fellow Republicans, and yet it is right now being used against fellow Republicans. So this is part of my frustration in the last few weeks of our session. We have some restrictions on when we can put in bills, personal bills, and that ends, I think, in March. And after that, it's all committee bills. So I was very frustrated this last year because I couldn't get bills out of ledge legal. I know that Sarah Vance had a pro-abortion bill she couldn't get out of ledge legal. I'm sorry, anti-abortion bill, pro-life bill, that she couldn't get out of ledge legal for 6 months because they were so clogged up and they were so backed up. So Lynn asked me to talk about some of my thoughts and some of the problems at the end of the session, and this is one of them. This is one of the problems that we have got to solve as a legislature. There is no room in a fully functioning legislature that works well together for FACL tactics. We have to have a relationship. I was at a town hall meeting Thursday night and somebody asked one of the guys, one of the other legislators, about accepting people like Kelly Merrick or Sarah Rasmussen or Louise Stutz into our caucus. And I was less than satisfied with the answer because, frankly, those people are elected by their representatives. We have to work with them. We either work with them on our team or we work with them in the opposition. So we have got to figure out a way as legislators how to work through our differences on process and get to the end game, which we all agree on. And I'm not sure how that works, but I do know that in my opinion, it doesn't include any of the FACL tactics that have been used in the last 4 or 5 years on fellow Republicans. So with that, I'm open to any questions from anyone.
So what's the status on the budget right now?
Oh, well, I forgot about that too. The budget is currently still in ledge legal. It's being, it hasn't been transmitted to the governor yet. And I'm a little unclear if that's actually, go ahead, Senator.
I was told that's supposed to be transmitted this week.
This week?
Yes.
So keep in mind that the governor has 20 days from the time it hits his desk to make any vetoes. So we're getting close to the end of time when I think July 1st is the new fiscal year. Yeah. So we're actually running out of time for him to make vetoes. And I'm sure that he's already looking at them and his staff is already looking at where the vetoes need to be. But still, it seems to be the time compression thing, again, that we have seen for so many times. We run right up against the deadline before we transmit something, or before we pass a bill, or before we allow the budget to move, and it's leverage.
Yep.
Using
For
time
those
as
that don't
leverage.
understand why do they do that, Kevin?
Yeah.
To the end game, what happens?
Well, when you have leverage, then the governor has no recourse oftentimes. So there's many bills that are being held up right now. There's one for attorney raises, attorney bonuses. So they use those as a lever when it gets really close, and the governor doesn't have enough time maybe to talk to his staff, to come up, talk to us, talk to other legislators to see what's most important. Hey, if you needed this or this, which would you pick? You know, because it's important that the legislators be involved, because we have the purse strings. And if he doesn't have the time to do that, then he has to make a decision without us. And oftentimes it's not the right decision, as we have seen with Dunleavy, especially in the past 2 years, so 2 budget cycles.
One other why for everybody, Kevin, is if what happens in the ADN, the Anchorage Democratic News, I'm sorry, Daily News, my bad, I always get that wrong, and other articles and unions come up within that last couple of weeks, what else happens from a pressure perspective on the governor or legislator?
It's the same thing that we saw during the concurrence vote when the Speaker Stutes held the budget up for 3 days. All of a sudden we're getting letters from the Alaska Chamber of Commerce, from the NEA, from the AOGA, from all of the alphabet soup industry organizations saying we don't want you to concur. We don't want to pay this big PFD was the big thing. I probably got 30 letters from different alphabet soup organizations, and most of them I responded to and said, you know what, especially like the Alaska Chamber of Commerce, they represent 750 different businesses, most of which are small businesses. Why wouldn't small business want a full PFD for you? I just can't imagine that they polled all 750 of their business members and said, do you want me to write this letter? Do you want to put this letter in? No, they just wrote the letter because of the power structure in the Alaska Chamber. Many of them are like that. Many of the big businesses, the big alphabet soup organizations, they don't want you to have a full PFD. So it's sort of the same thing with the vetoes. When the governor only has a few minutes or a few days to provide the vetoes, lots of pressure shows up from whether it be the advocates for the long trail or other, there's a 15% pay raise in there for the attorneys, the state attorneys. How do we give them a 15% pay raise and strip half of the PFD from all Alaskans? I just don't understand it. The real thing to me was that pay raise wasn't supposed to take effect until a year from this July, except for Representative Clayman put in an amendment that passed at the last minute to change the effective date to this year. It's not really a problem, except for we had already passed the $10,000 bridge bonus for the attorneys to bridge them to next year. So now not only do they get a $10,000 bonus, they get the 15% pay raise at the same time.
I'm sorry, what's Matt's profession?
That's attorneys.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that Representative Clayman and Representative Josephson are both attorneys, and they were the ones that were pushing this. So, I mean, to me, it was a little sleazy, and I said it on the floor, and I'll say it here again. It just smacks of sort of unethical behavior by legislators. So I didn't like it much. I still don't like it much. So that's why I'm up here telling you about it. So, any questions?
Kevin? Don't we have an ethics committee? Take care of that?
Yeah.
Dan?
Why would these alphabet soup people not want us to have a full PFD? I don't get that.
Well, because they think that they do what I tell people never to do. You never juxtapose the PFD in the same sentence with taxes. And they think that if they pay you the full PFD and we establish a precedent, eventually it's going to mean income taxes to pay for the government services that they feel like your PFD should pay for. So they don't want income taxes for their business owners and their businesses and increased taxes on oil to pay for government services. So we're stuck in this really weird spot where we're increasing government services because everybody wants government services, but we're not paying for them. This is sort of antithetical to the William F. Buckley style of conservatism, where you have to tie the people to the big government somehow, so that they know that if the government goes up, if the price of government goes up, their taxes might have to increase, and that in itself is self-limiting government. We don't do that in Alaska because they're trying to pay for government out of your PFD or out of the dividend. So their goal, their stated goal, is to get the permanent fund to $120 billion. And at that point, they feel like they can pay for all the government services out of what is allowed to come out of the permanent fund, and nobody will pay taxes. The problem with that is it sort of divorces us. It turns us into socialists, frankly. It's a socialist program. And now we don't pay for our government services. Some big fund pays for our government services, and we just expect government services to go up. Where does it end? 120 billion would have to be 150 billion. So that's not the way the dividend was designed. That's not the way the permanent fund was designed. And I feel like the first payout of the permanent fund needs to go to you, and it needs to be completely divorced from the budgetary talks. And budget and taxes, or revenue, as everybody calls them, need to be in one pile, sort of competing against each other. But
Kevin, can you answer this question? What your thoughts are on the top, say, 5, 10, 15% of wage earners and the divorce they have from what happens with government spending because they don't get taxed, and the dividend means very little to them, where it's a big
Sure.
percentage and helpful.
Yeah,
So
that's the Brad Keithley
why?
thing. That's the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, if you've ever been on his website. But he talks continuously about how the top 20%, who should be paying taxes on the money that they earn, and which would be helpful in increasing or at least stabilizing government services, they don't want us, and they're the drivers in some of these alphabet soup organizations. They're the ones that control them. So that's why the speaker waited 3 days to bring the concurrence vote to the floor, was to give them all an opportunity to apply pressure to their legislators. Tom McKay said it best: we need a robust private sector. We need businesses working. We need, I was so talented. We need businesses working, and the only possible way we're going to do it is with you and I buying and contributing to these businesses. Otherwise, we might as well all just stay home and let the permanent fund go to $150 billion, and we'll just get our meager permanent fund, and that'll be the end of it. Permanent fund dividend, yeah, getting corrected from my wife, go figure. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir.
Is it true that the budget itself has been increased about $300 million, well, roughly between $200 to $300 million a year now permanently with this last budget that was passed? If the governor doesn't veto out all those bonuses, raises.
Sure. You're talking about program increases. The operating budget itself is increased about 2%, I think. The reason you see such a big budget right now is because for the last 2 or 3 years we have not had any capital projects, any capital budget at all. So the largest increase is the capital budget, but you're exactly right. 15%, you can figure it out for yourself. 15% for all the state lawyers, all the state attorneys. I didn't bring it with me, it's actually on my desk in Juneau, but I have a list of the top 1,000 paid employees that work for the state of Alaska. The very bottom one, number 1,000, is $135,000 a year. Most of those in the top 1,000 are the attorneys. So,
And the UAA professor, the
and
UAA.
UA and UAF professors. Yes. So yes, the answer to your question is that's true. Any other questions? Yes.
I know Senator Showers worked hard on trying to get the audit of the election integrity released. Did you have any movement on that? And my other question is, a long time ago, maybe like a year and a half ago, I got a poll asking me what I thought about if the state government should be audited. And I used to be an auditor for Alaska Housing, and I'm really in favor of audits. And our whole system needs to be audited. I've worked for AHFC and I've worked for the city of Anchorage. And my husband used to be in the airline industry. He said if you lined up every DOT employee and you got rid of, and you had them count by threes and you got rid of 2 and 3, you'd probably be sized about right. And so I feel like government is like that. I've worked with some really awesome, hardworking, brilliant people in government, both city and the state. But boy, I've also knew a guy that sat there and he had, this is when Tony Knowles was governor, he had a big picture of him in his cubicle and he read his paper every day and he never worked. And so audits are really good. We need to be right-sized and we're not. And Jan had a really good question. How does our per capita government employees in Alaska stand up to our population compared to other states? Do you guys know that? So that's all my stuff.
All size. If not highest, we're in the top 3.
Okay.
I know that for a fact.
See, so we should count up by threes.
Yeah, right.
So this is one of the areas that David Eastman and I are in complete agreement on. The fact that all the union contracts were not in the budget and not available for us to look at is unconscionable.
Right.
It's hidden. It's the same thing. We have this open checkbook deal in Alaska where it's going to be very transparent, but not the school districts. So the second highest contribution that the state, or pot of money that the state puts out goes to the schools, goes to education. And none of them are online. None of that is transparent, not even to us. We have a hard time determining where the money goes once we send it to the school districts. It's important. DHSS, same thing. So we need to be more transparent. Auditing is absolutely an awesome idea. It sounds good when you're on the outside. When you get on the inside, that could take years. It is so spiderwebby, convoluted. Every fund and all the hidden funds. I mean, we try to do it on the budget subcommittees for, say, I sit on Department of Corrections and Department of Public Safety budget subcommittees, and I ask questions all the time. Why you ask for 37 new positions to pay for 37 new positions last year? How many of those did you fill? Well, 4. So why are you asking for another 30-ish this year? Well, because it's a slush fund. So we had tried to put some bills in that limits how they can do that, how they can create a slush fund out of unfilled or open positions. And it's they're just doing what they think is best for their department and to retain troopers in this case. Maybe we should fix the system and find a way to retain troopers without them having to use their excess slush fund PCNs to pay overtime. And to me, that would be a smarter way to do it. But you're not going to do it without an audit. You're not,
Right. You don't even
so-
know where the problems are without an audit.
Right, I agree.
Can I answer her question? She had one for me.
Sure.
And you at some point, or I'll stay over after and answer this. Remember what was done from the finance perspective? They didn't give us much of a choice. Bert Stedman did his standard MO, and he does it every year. This year, he combined all 3 budgets. We didn't have a choice to do separate budgets where we could vote yes or no on the capital, which we need, or the supplemental, which we may or may not need, or the operating budget where the growth is, government, right? And tied the PFD into all of it. So people can make their arguments about bloated budget, this, that, and the other, but it's back to negotiating, folks. You're given choices. Some of them aren't great choices, but when you get a $5,500 PFD to make some of this up to help people out, and he ties that to everything, so you're going to be happy if I vote no on that, and you're going to be mad I don't give you a PFD, but yeah, now I got to vote for the budget. This is the choices we're given. It's not as easy as people make it sound, right? And every year is a different budget. Oh, well, that's next year. Well, that's next year, not this year. Next year we can do something different, right? To answer your question on the audit from the Lieutenant Governor, on that, Kelly Shabaka told me when she came up here that she was asked specifically by the Governor and Lieutenant Governor to write that report. That's the reason she was brought here. A few weeks ago before the session ended, and in the last week and a half, Kevin Meyer came into my office and said, "We're not really happy about your election integrity bill." I'm like, really? Where the hell have you been for the last 2 years while I've been working on this, Kevin? By myself, The only real legislator with anything out there that's got it all on the line that's been called a white supremacist and a racist and all this garbage, and he comes in the last week and a half to my office and dares to tell me that way they don't like it. Where were you? I've been asking you for the audit that came from Kelly Chewbacca, who told me that she was brought up here by you, Kevin, to write this report, still won't give it to me, and then he told me, oh, well, that's not true. So you have to choose whether Kevin Meyer is telling you the truth or Kelly Chewbacca, and I'll tell you which one I believe is telling me the truth. The point of all that is this whole thing is obfuscated. I've never been given that report, which had 18 recommendations for things that we needed to fix, so for me to know, and the only way I can get access to it is if I sign away my rights via a non-disclosure agreement and put myself at political risk or at legal risk of ever divulging it and getting in trouble. That's what I'm dealing with. Again, not as simple as you would think, and you'd think we might be more aligned with each other. We're not. I've never gotten that report without all of those recommendations blacked out. That's the only version I've been allowed to see.
So there are a number of these things that we need to change. There is no possible way to change it from the minority. Regardless of what David and Christopher said the other night, you cannot change things from the minority.
You're not in power.
You must get to the majority. You must have control of the committees. That's what the majority means. And a majority isn't what Louise is running right now. 21 people is not a majority. You have to have 25, 26, 27 would be best because that's the 2/3 vote threshold. But we have to get there as Republicans if we're going to change any of this. If we're going to pass election integrity bills, if we were in the majority, we would already have a pro-life bill passed, signed by the governor, and on the books. But we're not in the majority. So how do you even file a bill like that? Why would you file one and transmit your plans and ideas for next session when you might be in the majority? So you're better off writing the bill, get it written, get your ideas on paper, and wait till you get to the majority, or get somebody in the majority that will write it if you're no longer there. So, yes, sweetheart.
Can you address the problem with putting in a bill that you see as being the way to go, but you're in the minority and you don't have control over the amendments in the committee and how that can be transformed?
Sure, so what you're talking about is what Pat Martin has accused me of doing, is not sponsoring pro-life legislation, not co-sponsoring pro-life legislation. So Chris Kirka has a bill in co-sponsored by David Eastman that's stuck in Ivy Sponholz's committee. Why would I put my name on that? Ivy Sponholz is the most pro-abortion, anti-life legislator that we have right now. Why would I put my name on a bill that I know is going to be stuck in her committee? I'll give you a classic example. Andy Josephson put a bill in 2 years ago at the beginning of the first part of our legislative session to raise the gas tax 10.5 cents. Raise the state tax on gasoline. Currently we have 8 cents a gallon state tax on gasoline, lowest in the nation. Andy Josephson wanted to raise it by 10 cents. By the time we passed it at the end of the last session, it was a decrease, it was a tax holiday, a decrease in taxes. Now can you imagine as a Democrat putting in a bill that was going to increase taxes and having it come out the other end as a decrease, as a tax holiday? That's the kind of thing that you face if you start co-sponsoring a bunch of bills without taking into account the fact of where they're sitting, what committee they're in, and what could happen to them via amendments when you are not in the majority. When they're in the majority, it's a whole different story because you can count on your people to help you with the amendments. You can count on your committee chairs to get the bill out. You can count on having your amendments passed, having good amendments put in there. When you're in the minority, you can't. So there is no point in sponsoring, co-sponsoring pro-life legislation or that sort of thing that you know is going to come out the other side as pro-abortion amendments. So, any other questions, dear?
I'm going to just quickly ask for a motion to adjourn, and then we'll continue, because then we can finish up our meeting.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, so, in a second, Natalie? Okay, but we want to continue, so anybody that wants to stay and continue, I know we have Senator Schauer, we have Senator Wilson, we even have Stu Graham here from the Wasilla City Council, we have Representative Kathy Tilton, tons of great sources of information, and so stay and ask questions.
One thing I will say, if you don't understand something that's going on procedurally,
Yep.
please call your representative. or your senator. If it's something on the floor, call me. I would rather have a phone call than I would have a bunch of
Misinformation.
Facebook posts out there about how McCabe's doing this or McCabe did that. And a phone call oftentimes will explain it, because not everybody knows how the sausage is made. So, any other questions?
And quickly, I'll say that Kathy Mosier from the Valley Republican Women's Club is here also, and they have an event this coming Thursday that's about candidate information and how to help candidates or how to run as a candidate. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. That'll be interesting.
I have one comment to that. Just this season, I was talking to some folks, wherever they were, earlier about it, is that we have differences, right? I mean, I think most Republicans, we're not all the same, right? We're not, but most of us have generally the same way, same highway, same direction, right? I mean, by and large, and with some differences. And this is the time of year where we need to be very careful about fighting each other, because we're really, really good at shooting, turning the guns inward and fighting. And what amazes me is we're here fighting each other about our differences and this, that, and the other. And you said this and did this and all that stuff. And I'm like, where's the mention of making sure Governor Walker doesn't come back to kill the dividend?
Yeah.
Where's the mention of the
Yes.
Democrats that are putting in, let females, have to compete against biological males? Where's the angst about, them taking your PFD or wanting taxes? That's where our focus should be. All I'm asking is that we've got differences and there's some anger and some contentious, I get it. But for the next 6 months, folks, it ought to be about making sure that we have at least people that generally agree going back to Juneau, as opposed to letting Democrats and others go back, because we're really good about letting Democrats slide into office because we fight each other. I can live with some of the differences, but what I can't live with is another Governor Walker for 4 years. You want your PFD? He's back. It's gone. I got news for you. Some of these races we lose because we're fighting each other and not putting our energy to make sure certain other legislators don't come back. Well, then you're going to have a worse situation. And you talk about Dunleavy, love or hate him, people got their issues, I understand it. But remember, he doesn't have a solid red legislature behind him. This legislature has fought him on almost everything he's tried to do. So assign blame where it is. All I'm saying, folks, is that as a group, especially with the Republicans, women's clubs, and other things, the best we can, we need to at least put aside our differences enough to come together to put as many people back in office as generally agree with us on the principles with our differences. That's more important right now than it is fighting each other in little bits and pieces of things. It is. And there's lots of infighting and biting at each other's, at each other's ankles. And we need to be careful about that for the next 6 months. We can go back to fighting about some of the things when it's over. But what we don't want is a body controlled by muskrats or Democrats, because I'll tell you right now, the Senate is probably in worse shape, David can give his opinion, than the House is going to be. I think the House is going to be stronger if we have three of the old guard come back in the Senate. There is a real chance of a muskox caucus and watching us have an 8 or 9 strong Republican minority, while 3 or 4 of those Republicans throw their hats in, which I know they're already talking about doing probably, with some of those Democrats if we're not careful. So I'm just saying that we have to figure that out and be careful, and I would ask all of us to try to make sure that we do our best to put aside our differences for the next 6 months and make sure that we have as strong of a coalition as we can have going into November or next January. So
Yeah.
Rank the red. You have to rank the red. Before any Democrat, I know that people are pissed off at Dunleavy, but if you put Guerra above Dunleavy or Walker above Dunleavy on your rank of ranked choice voting,
No.
so.
Yeah, you don't have to put Democrats at all. That's an important thing.
Yeah.
You don't
I was
have to
gonna
do
say,
that.
there's
Put
nothing
nothing but
to do.
Republicans in. If you don't like certain ones or they're not your favorite, then just put them as the last one. But you don't have to fill every bubble. Don't do it. Put just the Republicans in. Put in Dunleavy and Pierce and Kirka, if those are the 3 that you like, or in whatever order you want. Don't put the other ones in. Don't even give them an option. Don't give them a possible vote as it works its way through.
I'll hang around for any other questions, but those of you that are marching in the parade, feel free to.
You're gonna be late. That's a long drive to go march at 1 or 11.
All right, thank you all for tuning in here today. Please like, share, make sure that you go to my website, politadick.com, and show your support. I'm heading off to the Colony Parade to go live stream whatever I can of that, and then I've got to go to the borough office and go vote. I'm one of those people that likes to wait for the very last minute to do those kind of things, so that is what I'm waiting to go do now. So again, please like and share this video. Thank you all for tuning in here today, and I will see you the next time.